Welcome to the War Room from our nation's capital. We're in the green zone of our nation's capital, and according to members of Congress, they want to make it permanent, this perimeter fencing around the nation's capital. Monday, the 18th of January, year of our Lord, 2021, now following a podcast, one of the biggest in the world, with 30 million downloads. On the John Fredericks Radio Network, on Real America's Voice, Rumble, Pluto, every distribution apparatus you can get will be on Gab here shortly. In fact, later today we're going to have in this show Jeff Brain from CloudTub. He'll be on. We're going to have Raheem Kassam. We're going to go through everything that's happening on Capitol Hill today, around Capitol Hill, in this kind of armed fortress the nation's capital. Is Boris on? Okay, we're trying to get Boris Epshteyn on momentarily, just dropped. We're going to talk about the Liz Cheney situation. Raheem's going to be on, talk about the National Guard up here. They're checking the National Guard. I want to go to Liz Cheney for a second. Liz Cheney essentially led this effort, one of the leaders of the effort, to impeach the President of the United States last week. It was her. I think she didn't stand up and actually speak, so they couldn't get her on television, couldn't cut a 30-second spot. But her language was so adamant that it was used in Steny Hoyer's final summary argument when they voted to impeach the president, essentially along party lines, except for 10 Republicans who broke. Have to remember that allowed the Democrats to be able to use this. That was the most bipartisan impeachment in the nation's history. It's hurdled us to really what's going to be a post administration trial in the Senate. We're going to talk about strategy and everything with that. But Liz Cheney, kind of one of the ringleaders of that. And people out in Wyoming have been just furious about it. The chairman of the Wyoming GOP came on the show on Saturday, said she had not talked to them beforehand, or she had not had the common courtesy to talk to them about afterwards. They were furious. And, of course, I think it was Joey Caranto today, who's the Cobalt County GOP chair. They had a meeting after our show on, I think it was Saturday afternoon, where the Central Committee voted unanimously to censure Liz Cheney, and they were going to lead an effort to go to the Wyoming GOP. I think it's the convention or some big meeting, a conference that we're having in a couple of weeks with other counties that are doing this, and they want to demand that she comes back there and explain, because right now she has not told them anything about what they've actually done, why she did this, and what her logic was. I want to bring us now Boris Epshteyn, who was one of President Trump's lawyers on the campaign. And I want to cut right to the list. I know you got a lot to go through, Boris, but I want to go to the Liz Cheney situation first, because I think it's very important, particularly coming up on this trial with the Republican senators, so they understand how furious Republican voters overall, not just Trump supporters, but Republican voters in general. Out in Wyoming, they have a very unified Republican Party. They have a strong grassroots element, huge Trump base, huge MAGA, but they also have the establishment Republicans are with them too. So, Boris, walk me through the Liz Cheney of it all first.
Steve, great to be with you. God bless. Thanks so much for having me this afternoon. You are totally right. Liz Cheney's gambit, which absolutely did not pay off, is blowing up right in her face. And it's typical Washington, D.C. Republican establishment that came out to attack President Trump, and MAGA is pushing back on. What Liz Cheney was counting on, it was a little bit of a Jerry Maguire moment, who's coming with me, that the Republican Party would go with her and shun President Trump. Well, the opposite has happened. She got 9 Republicans to go with her in the House. Those Republicans are already saying they are ready to have their terms end after this current Congress. You heard that from Peter Maher in Michigan, and now on her base in Wyoming, the people of Wyoming, the Republicans of Wyoming, are furious with Liz Cheney, and that is absolutely a lesson that Republican senators need to pay attention to. That if they are willing to play into the hands of the corrupt, cynical Democrats, it is going to hurt them with their constituents. From what I understand, Liz Cheney did not check with the Wyoming GOP did not talk to the Wyoming GOP, did not talk to her constituents either before or after her attempt to participate with Democrats in this railroading of President Trump. Well, guess what? Now she's much more likely than not to lose her position as the third ranking Republican in the House. And I would be shocked if she were to be, unless something changes drastically and she somehow apologizes for her action and atones for her action, if she were to get reelected out of Wyoming in 2022.
Okay, I want to go. We got two things going on. Number one, the people in Wyoming are clearly furious. Now at the county party level, in the district level, they're starting to have meetings where they're voting unanimous to censure her. Then you have the whole situation with leadership. Remember, she's the number 3 senior person in back of McCarthy and Scalise in Republican leadership on Capitol Hill. That's what was so stunning that she came out. We understand, and this is from the press reports and doing checkers on the Hill, that Lee Zeldin and Congressman Stefanik had been making calls about forcing a vote on Liz Cheney, an up or down vote on Liz Cheney as part of leadership. Kevin McCarthy has defended her. What are you hearing now about this whole leadership situation?
Well, as the chairwoman of the GOP conference, her job, Liz Cheney's job, is specifically not. It's not to whip votes, but she whipped votes against the questioning of the election fraud. She whipped votes against the move by many Republican members of Congress to continue looking into election fraud and voter fraud. And then she whipped votes in favor of the impeachment of President Trump, the president of her own party. And the impeachment that we all know was rushed through, that is absolutely an empty political hatchet job by Democrats against President Trump. By the way, the same Democrats that are having Mr. Feng Feng, Eric Swalwell, now be on the Homeland Security Committee, they're okay with that, but they're all up in arms about President Trump giving a speech in which he said march peacefully and patriotically to the Capitol. We know how hypocritical the Democrats are. Well, Liz Cheney participated in that, whipped the votes for impeachment, and now she's ruining, I think, that decision. But, we reap what we sow, as they say. And I think she's very much reaping the downside of going against President Trump, of smacking the MAGA crowd in the face, the MAGA population in the face. And let's not forget, and Republicans, I think, too often do, that the MAGA movement is only growing. 63 million for President Trump in 2016, 74 million in 2020. So as a Republican elected official, the job of these people, the job of the elected officials, Steve, is to follow their constituents, to serve their constituents. And it is very clear Liz Cheney did not do that in terms of her constituents from the state of Wyoming, and she did not do that in terms of representing the Republican Party, which right now is united behind President Trump.
I just want to make sure our audience understands something on this. Liz Cheney focus is not just about the MAGA agenda going forward. It's just not about fighting whatever Joe Biden puts up that's anti-MAGA or anti-American first, but it's also talking about the Senate trial and sending a strong message to GOP senators. Liz Cheney's using the same phraseology that Mitch McConnell. Can you interpret for our audience, Boris, when they say vote your conscience? What is that? What does that actually mean?
What it means is that Liz did not whip votes against impeachment. She actually whipped them for impeachment. And Mitch McConnell is saying, well, you know what? I'm not going to bother myself with defending the president of my party even after he's left office. And the Republican senators are free to do what they want. Well, if Republican senators are smart, which some of them actually are, they will look at what's happening with Liz Cheney as an example of what happens when an elected official stabs their constituents in the back. And I would urge Republican elected officials in the Senate to distinguish themselves from Democrats and not to be hypocrites, not to be cynical, but actually do the right thing. Let's dispose of this ludicrous, empty impeachment and actually try to do something that's right for the American people, which, by the way, would be giving the American people $2,000, which is what President Trump called for. Mitch McConnell went against, and that is what was a large part of the cause for the result in the Georgia Senate runoffs. So that is what Republican officials should be focused on, which is serving their constituents and not dealing with a contrived impeachment charade, which is going to be in front of them here in a couple of days, based on what we understand.
Yeah, people. One of the reasons we want to do this, you have to be more. You have to be unified now more than ever, particularly the conference in the House, because Biden's coming rolling, and this is why we started the morning show with a massive amnesty bill. That amnesty bill is to basically allow 11 million to 15 million illegal aliens, according to Numbers USA. Steve Cortez thinks it's closer to 20 million to have full citizenship. So the conference has to be united. And you can certainly, MAGA cannot unite in back of Liz Cheney. The guys in Wyoming are telling us that as they censure her. Okay, next topic. Steve Cohen, the congressman from Tennessee, in the National Guard. What is going? By the way, people should understand, in D.C. right now, it's getting crazy. I mean, there's 25,000 troops. These troops are armed. We know people up here in Capitol Hill. Capitol Hill is a total green zone all the way down Pennsylvania, Constitution Avenue, the whole central part of the U.S. government complex. And people can't even walk around now. You walk around and the troops say, hey, where are you going? They're doing ID checks on American citizens. It's pretty over the top. Talk to us about Steve Cohen in the National Guard, Boris.
Well, what Steve Cohen did, and Steve Cohen is probably one of the biggest jokes up on Capitol Hill. And as you know, that's a tall order, right? Steve Cohen was the guy who was bringing in chicken and eating it to make some sort of point that nobody ever understood. Steve Cohen is an absolute disaster and an embarrassment, even for a Democrat elected official. And again, that's a very high bar to clear. Well, Steve Cohen went out there. Now he's talking about the political leanings of the National Guard and suggesting that if our troops, if our brave men and women who defend America did not vote for Joe Biden, they're somehow not to be trusted to be defending the inauguration and securing the inauguration. He's saying that 75% of the National Guard is somehow open to or interested in doing something wrong during the inauguration. So he's bad-mouthing our troops. But we all know that this moment of respect for the
hang over a second. Why do you say he's
bad? A joke.
But Boris, why do you say he's bad-mouthing the troops? Be specific. When you say he's bad-mouthing the troops, what do you mean by that?
What he's saying is, if members of the National Guard who are in D.C. to secure the inauguration, he broke down how many of those are likely Biden voters. He's saying that only 25% of them are potentially Biden voters, and he's saying the rest of them, even though they are brave men and women of the uniform, that they would do something to cause, either not defend against an attack or disgustingly potentially cause an attack.
Well, but he's saying that because these people are patriots in their National Guard and they volunteer, they're obviously MAGA. They're obviously deplorables, right? But it shouldn't be.
Well, here's what he said. He said
it shouldn't be any. It shouldn't be any. This is this whole social media checking, right? It shouldn't be any purification process. So tell us what he actually said.
Right. He's saying.
I tell you what, Boris, hang on, Boris, hang on for a second. I want to finish this. I got to keep you over break. Boris Epshteyn is going to join us after break. We got to talk about what's going on here in Washington, D.C., particularly with the National Guard. We've got some other topics to go through. Raheem Kassam is going to join us. We've got the CEO of Clout Hub, about how you can get a platform you can use on the right. We're going to return. We're in pandemic in just a second.
We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all lied for too long.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
CNN's in full meltdown because they've done a poll that shows that only 19% of Republicans think that Joe Biden's illegitimate. That means 81% thinks he's illegitimate or illegal. They're in full meltdown because of that. Want to make sure you get all the current information and shows as the social media titans, the oligarchs in Silicon Valley, try to shut down the War Room. It's impossible to shut down the War Room because great content will find its audience. Want everybody to text War Room, that's one word, War Room, to 888-111 and download the app now. Or join the community and go to warroom.org. That's warroom.org, and just hit /join community. You can just go right there. Also, if you want to be in the live chat, and the live chat is a little spicy today, go to America's Voice. That's one word, americasvoice.news. Get into the live chat. Go to minds.com, Gab, Rumble, podcast platforms everywhere now with 30 million downloads. Also, Populous Press. That's one word, populouspress.com, Creative Destruction Media, and many, many, many others. Okay, Boris, when I bring you back in the live chat, someone's already pointed out that ideological test for our armed services, for people serving their country, is anti-American. Tell us what Steve Cohen said so we can move on to your other topic. I want to give exactly what was his smear.
His smear was, if you did not vote for Joe Biden, you could not be trusted. That is a smear. That if you are a member of the National Guard, if you are a man or woman who's honorably serving our country, protecting our freedom and our democracy, but you happen to vote for Donald Trump, you cannot be trusted. That is Steve Cohen's smear. That is a smear. And he did this calculation how, 90% of the National Guard is white males. Only, according to him, only 20%, I believe that number is wrong, of white males voted for President for Joe Biden. Well, then the rest of these people can't be trusted. Absolutely disgusting. And it is exactly the kind of toxicity that these Democrats are dealing now. And if you look at history, it is very dangerous.
Okay,
it is a thread that you can weave.
I want to go back. I want to go on that thread. We had Rabbi Sparrow today, started with just a magnificent prayer to the nation, and then the rabbi took us through the Reichstag fire, the big lie. I want to ask you, does this feel a little bit like now we're entering an era of what the Stalinists did, of what the Jacobins did, the Jacobins did in revolutionary France? Where are we right now in our country's history, Boris?
It's a scary time. And I will tell you, I came from my family when I was 11. We came from the former Soviet Union, something that the left smeared me for. I was a chubby little Jewish kid, and they called me a Russian spy because we came here as refugees seeking the American dream. So even my memories of the breakdown of the latter days of the Soviet Union, but where I could not say that I was Jewish, where there was absolutely no dissent until it all broke down. This is what this feels like. It feels like, communist Soviet Union, 1984, the inability to speak your mind, to use your freedom of speech, the fact that other senators are calling for Senator Cruz and Senator Hawley to be removed. Why? Because they dared to say that there was election fraud in 2020, which there was. The fact that Simon Schuster tried to cancel Senator Hawley's book, which he's now going with another publisher. So the banning of books, the banning of free speech, the toxicity being assigned to Trump voters and Trump supporters, Don Lemon going out there and saying that if you voted for Trump, you're with the KKK and you're with hateful groups. 4 million Americans, God-loving, an overwhelming majority, God-loving, good, law-abiding Americans. And that's what you're talking about. But of course, when the other side riots and loots and Antifa is blowing up cities and burning businesses and killing people like David Dorn, the former police captain in St. Louis, murdered in cold blood, people are not saying that the Democrats are all bad people. But in terms of the way that the left and it's not just party against party. It is the Democrats plus mainstream media plus big tech. That is a powerful oligarchy there of these groups, and they're all descending on the MAGA movement, on President Trump, and on Republicans as a whole. And Republican officials better stand up and not appease this overarching hate that's coming from the left. Because if you cow down to it, if you cower in fear, nothing good is going to happen. You look throughout history, you look at the Jacobins in the 1780s, 1790s, you look at what happened in the Soviet Union from 1917 through the early 1990s, and yes, you look at Nazi Germany, and the terminology, the big lie, as we talked about late last week, Jake Tapper, Claire McCaskill, accusing Republicans of using the big lie is the same terminology used by Hitler and Goebbels in accusing Jews of using the big lie.
Boris, thank you very much. What's your social media? By the way, there's a good book in. Rabbi Sparrow opened it today and had brilliant analysis of this. Boris Epshteyn, who spent his childhood in the Soviet Union, so he knows what oppression is. Boris, what is your social media handles?
Steve, thanks so much. Instagram, Boris_Epshteyn, Boris_Epshteyn. Twitter @BorisEP. Instagram, Boris_Epshteyn. Twitter @BorisEP. Stay strong. God bless. Stand up to the hate.
Boris, thank you very much. Boris has been there as a child and a young child in a situation like this. Raheem Kassam, a lot of people don't realize, but Raheem Kassam is actually one of the first guys I met. There was a reporter during the color revolution with Maidan, the Maidan revolution back in the Ukraine. What, in 2013 was it? 2013, 2014, Raheem? To walk us through, right now, the Green Zone. Tell me what your thoughts are on this Green Zone, which is really a military occupation of Washington, D.C.
Yeah, Steve, I mean, every time I go outside, every time we go from the war room, every time we walk down the street, it gets more and more bizarre. That's why I found it so imperative for the National Pulse show, which is on at 3 p.m. here on Real America's Voice. I got our producers 5, 6, 7 days ago to go out and start taking pictures and taking videos around Capitol Hill. Because I said, hey, people are going to need to know what happened here. And the corporate news media wasn't showing it at the time. And they weren't showing it at the time because they didn't want America to see just how much this thing would ramp up. So let's go back and remember what happened here. You went from a few thousand troops that were deployed immediately after January the 6th around and without any weaponry around the Capitol buildings, the Senate office buildings, the House office buildings, all around very small neighborhood. Remember, a lot of this is residential around here, around the very small neighborhood of Capitol Hill. Nobody wanted to document it at the time, and I said it's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse because it's unchecked. It's unchecked power, and what happens to unchecked power grows. So now the perimeter is not just expanded. They didn't just add railings and 20-foot steel barriers and gates and patrols all around this neighborhood, but then what they did, they added barbed wire. They made sure that the police and the military units out there had their long weapons out with them. They're absolutely terrifying to people who aren't familiar with a life like this, which includes just a heck of a lot of people here in Washington, D.C., who cannot believe their eyes. And what's really interesting about this all as well is you try to navigate around this area. It takes you about 40 minutes, 45 minutes to get either in or out of Capitol Hill here. You see it on the highways. You see it coming in from the highways. There are big military vehicles parked, entire roads closed, entire parts of town that you may not traverse without being asked the question, who are you? What business do you have here? And even if you're a resident on Capitol Hill, you're asked to prove that you reside on Capitol Hill or that you work on Capitol Hill. Now, the last time I checked, this was still the United States of America. And I understand that a lot of people out there are now afraid. The truth is, this is no time to be afraid. We do not have time to be fearful of these antediluvian and tyrannical measures that are designed to strike fear into the hearts of people here in the nation's capital, because that's entirely what they expect of you. They know that fear is paralyzing. They know that if they sell you this idea that there are, hordes of Proud Boys marauding towards Washington, D.C. right now, then Jim Acosta will get up on television and convince the nation that that's precisely what's happening, and the nation will fall into line as a result of it. But the truth of the matter is, we now know from corrections that are quietly made to Reuters articles, to little paragraphs that are added to CNN articles and reports over the course of time, that none of the intelligence that they claimed said any of that was borne out. We now know that the person from Virginia who was found with 5 ammunition with him actually was a security contractor for this whole operation in town. And despite the fact that they had to quietly correct those stories, they never kind of tried to project to the American public with the same gusto that they projected to the American public that he was a threat. They've never tried to correct that reporting. So many people out there now are living in fear. They're living in an induced fear. They're demoralized about the future of their nation. And that's precisely when you talk about the Jacobins, when you talk about the Soviets, that's precisely the strategy that they use to tell people, hey, don't worry about being an American. Don't worry about your constitution. We're going to keep you safe.
The war room's a no whining zone. I realize people are some demoralized. Get over it. You got to pick yourself up, dust yourself off. Your country needs you now more than ever. Correct me if I'm wrong, Raheem. because I haven't followed the details to the T. But I think you had, in Michigan, you had a couple of guys show up with guns and they took a selfie. New York City had 3 layers of security. Nobody showed up at the state capitol. The state capitol, big thing over the weekend was a total bust, right? Essentially, nobody really showed up. A couple individuals showed up, or even groups showed up, small groups with their Second Amendment rights, took selfies and moved on. In D.C., you had the contractor at 7th and Constitution, I think it was. He had worked there for a couple of days. Had a gun and some magazines in his back. I think it was his pickup truck, and he worked there. Also, the other woman who came up to the fence thought she was in Trump's cabinet and was saying she's got to go to a cabinet meeting. I think that's the only. This thing is so they cannot help themselves from overplaying their hand. This is over the top, and it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing because we didn't do this after 9/11. We didn't do it after Gaddafi's threats. We never did it, okay? I want to return in a second with Raheem, Kassam, and the War Room.
Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all opportunity.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. We're going to bring in Raheem Kassam, my co-host, in a second. Raheem, this is pure psychological warfare. You're right. He's trying to demoralize. I think what needs to happen is I would strongly recommend that the president and the vice president go tomorrow to the Brady with DOJ, FBI, and just give people a brief. What is the really threat? They talk about chatter. There's IC chatter, but there's always chatter. Let's go through and see exactly what this is. They'll put it all on the table. Why D.C. has become a green zone. Why it's become an armed military camp with checkpoints and armed troops and more coming in. It looks like. I think everybody's for a safe capital. Everybody's for, and that's what I said the other day when they had the speech in the rally down at the Ellipse on Capitol Hill. They had some bike racks, and the Capitol Hill police, the same people, men and women we see all the time and know well, that are up and down the Capitol Hill all the time. They didn't have any U.S. Marshals. Bowser and Pelosi had specifically turned down National Guard request, U.S. Marshal request, other requests from other law enforcement agencies to be up there and be around, just have a show of force. So in case anything did rear its head, people would know, well, I can't do that because there's a show of force and I shouldn't go there, right? Didn't see any of that. We got to get to the bottom of what they knew and when they knew it. And now it's the exact opposite. Is the threat worse now than it was then? If it is, let's just get it on the table. Americans want transparency and Americans want accountability. Raheem Kassam, what say you, sir?
Well, I think that's really important, and people really must pay very close attention to this. Did you see this kind of lockdown of anywhere post 9/11? Have you seen this kind of lockdown anywhere post all of the wars that the United States has been in, the terror threats the United States has faced, anything of the level of proportion of 30,000 troops in the nation's capital, walls erected around the capital? I mean, what does it say about the FBI's forward planning? What does it say about the Secret Service if what they're saying, and the Capitol Police, if they're saying that, hey, the situation is so out of control that we actually cannot protect the president-elect and the vice president-elect and members of the Congress now, so we need to deploy the military to the tune of 30,000 people. Think about 30,000 as a deployment. Think about all the logistics that have to go along with that, the sleeping, the feeding, the quartering, everything that needs to go along with that. And who's picking up the tab at the end of the day. And Jack Posobiec said something really important this morning on this morning show, and I want people to go back and remember what he said as well. He said, people who are serving in the National Guard right now, who are being investigated by the FBI for their political preferences, for their philosophical beliefs, for what books they have read, for what memes they have shared, just in case they turn out to be some white supremacist that might do something nasty once they're inside the green zone. They need to be going to their IGs right now and to their commanding officers and to their people that they are supposed to whistleblow to right now and say, hey, hold on, I didn't sign up for this. I didn't sign up to be interrogated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I didn't sign up to be vetted by political apparatchiks because I don't believe what they believe, and therefore they're saying that I can't do the job that I have done, putting the country on my back and the safety of the country on my back. That's what needs to be happening here. And ordinary people watching this right now need to take a lesson away from this as well. That lesson is this. There is no transparency around this. We are being told that you must give up some of your liberties in order for a little bit of temporary security. Where have we heard that before? So ordinary Americans, it is on you. And I say this as a foreigner who you have kindly welcomed into your country and looked after very well and treated very well and with lots of kindness and respect. I say this to you. There is nowhere else in the world you can flee to if you allow your politicians to take this level of tyrannical control. There is nowhere more free in the entirety of the world than the United States of America. And it is your job right now to get on the phone, to get on the email to your representatives and say, hey, why is there no transparency about this? I don't care if they're a Democrat. I don't care if they're a Republican. I couldn't care less if they're a Martian. Your job is to get on the phone with them, to make your voice heard and say, hey, what is going on exactly in the nation's capital? Because nobody is being transparent about this. Why isn't President Trump here up here on Capitol Hill going, what the heck is going on here? This is not anything that should be going on in the United States of America. Steve, what they're trying to achieve here is a national capitulation. They know if they get you to capitulate in terms of how much they can scare you, how much they can paralyze you through fear, then they can get anything else past you. Mask mandates, immigration amnesties, all the rest of it. And they're all for what? A safe capital. For the last 5 years, we've had a president trying to establish a wall around the country because he wants a safe nation, and we've been told that walls don't work. Suddenly, when AOC and Nancy Pelosi feel a little bit frightful because there's a shaman in the Senate chamber with some horns on, then they want to erect a perimeter and a fence around the nation's capital. Explain that one to me.
Remember, the shaman in his interview before then, talking about the quantum realm, said, it was the witches he was looking for. So I want to be specific here, though. When you talk about 25,000 to 30,000 troops, National Guard, now they're up armored and with weapons. That's approximately 2.5 to 3 divisions, right? You consider a division as 10,000. That's three divisions deployed to Washington, D.C. with razor wire, multiple checkpoints. It's in depth, right, as far as this gate goes. And if it's necessary, that's fine. It's necessary. I'm not arguing, hey, but somebody's got to come forward and I think make the case of why this is necessary. It's got to be more than, intelligence community chatter. Let's be very specific. You had a goof this weekend at the state capitol. State capitol's all armed up and nobody showed up. Now, maybe it was a deterrent. If that's the case, let's get the facts. To connect dots here and to show you what they're doing, this is psychological warfare, because what they want to do in these, remember, let's step back and look what Biden's talking about. Remember, Rahm Emanuel said never waste a crisis. They're talking about 4 overlapping and inextricably linked crises. It's a crisis of the pandemic. The pandemic triggered an economic and financial crisis. We had war and pandemic said that from day one. That's one of the theses of our show. Then they say there's a climate change crisis and there's a social justice and racial crisis on top of that. They're going to come through with policy initiatives, and that's why we started the show off today with Steve Cortez. But here's what's going to happen. They're pushing and going to push this domestic terror bill, because what they're going to say is the Trump voters are violent, the Trump voters are dangerous, the Trump voters are a clear and present danger. And that's what this whole Senate trial after the impeachment of President Trump is about. And so this is why today I think it's either tomorrow Vice President Pence or President Trump, or just authorize the FBI and DOJ to come forward and give a briefing. The other day they were supposed to, in the last second it changed to kind of a conference call, of which the Jack Posobics of the world were not on there, but kind of their featured favorites from the New York Times and CNN and all of that. So it's time now to actually get the information out there. If there's enough information, if there's enough threat to require this, we should know that as a nation. Because right now we're heading into a inauguration in a couple of days' time that the city is more of an armed camp. When President Lincoln came to give his inaugural address in March of 1861. And at that time, I think there had 5 or 6 states had already seceded from the Union. We were about 30 days away from actual the firing on Fort Sumter to start the war, to start the kinetic part of the war. And at that time, he had, President Lincoln had to sneak in to Washington, D.C. and Baltimore on the overnight train because they thought there may be some people in Baltimore that were going to try to assassinate him. So in 1861, it was not on the brink of a civil war. And in fact, many states had already succeeded we didn't have nearly this. President Lincoln didn't ask for 40,000 troops, I think, to after Fort Sumner. So I think questions have to be asked, and it's the Republicans, and we want all the war room posse now to, put your depression or, if you're down the dumps, hey, that sounds like a personal problem. Okay, need you up on the computer, need you making phone calls, need you sharing social media. You got to get to the barricades here and just ask your representatives what is going on. Why are you not asking for accountability? Why are we not asking for a thorough vetting of this? And if the threat is at that level requires this, the entire nation should know about it, and we should start to have a conversation about it. Raheem, Kassam, your thoughts?
And do not accept I can't talk about it for an answer. Do not accept it is the way it is for an answer. Do not accept, hey, we'll talk about it in 6 months when this threat is over for an answer. No, that is not the American way. You can either be afraid or you can be an American, right? And I say that, and I know we have an international audience here, but there is a distinction. I've been here for several years now. There is a very clear distinction between what the freeborn American, with all the rights that the freeborn Englishman used to have, can exercise and can do every single day, and that's what you need to be doing. Do not accept those answers. Do not accept the fobbing off. Let's think about this. We were told by Reuters, hey, actually, there wasn't this plan to zip tie and assassinate members of Congress. They pulled that story. They had to scrub it. They didn't issue a correction. They didn't explain or apologize to their audience. So how is it different? How was what happened any different from when the left burned down Washington, D.C. last year, from when they occupied Senate offices, from when they terrorized citizens and residents and businesses here in the nation's capital, all over the country as well, how when they destroyed federal property, pulled down statues, police were murdered, children were murdered. We've seen none of that from America First people. We've seen none of that from MAGA people. What we saw was a handful of miscreants and violent lunatics who were in that Senate chamber. They got swiftly kicked out, and now we're in a state of martial law, effectively, up here on Capitol Hill. That is an absolute shocking nonsense that belongs confined to the dustbin of Soviet-era history, and it is up to the American people to make sure that it does.
Before we go, we've got the Clout Hub CEO is going to join us next. But Raheem, I want to go to a breaking story you had today. We didn't have enough time in the morning. I want to talk about the Lincoln Project.
Yeah, the Lincoln Project, of course, being this incredibly anti-Trump, really disgustingly so, the scurrilous videos that they used to create about the president of the United States. By the way, I think they're now being hired by Bibi Netanyahu's opposition in Israel as well. I mean, you talk about when you hear about what's going on with John Weaver, it would be the last of people that I would want to hire. But hey, that's Netanyahu's opponent's choice, I suppose. The Lincoln Project, we've gone through all of their spending over the course of the last couple of years, and we found that they've actually been pocketing millions upon millions of their own donor money to their own companies, over $10 million that they received from largely Democratic billionaire donors, so I feel no sympathy towards them, but they have been pocketing the money into their own companies, providing services for and on behalf of the Lincoln Project. And we've now got the receipts to prove it. There's a whole lot more coming out about the Lincoln Project in the next couple of days, and we'll be at the forefront of exposing this highly grifterish organization that has taken Democrat money, stuffed their pockets, accused the president and his family of being grifters, all the while sucking up to the political left and handing over power. Selling out conservatism in Washington, D.C. appears to be an incredibly lucrative business.
Last thing, real quickly, the National Pulse has become at the forefront of the anti-Chinese Communist Party movement. You've had all the announcements of Wuhan. You had the announcements of Radcliffe and taking the involvement. You had Frank Gaffney on your site today talking about President Trump's got to designate as the CCP as a transnational criminal organization. Real quickly, why is Radcliffe's letter, which would be a bombshell any other place, that actually says CIA try to suppress CCP involvement in this? In 30 seconds, Raheem, why is that not getting more play in the last days of President Trump's presidency?
Because it's exactly what the Democrats accuse the president of doing with Russia. And the one thing I really want the audience to reflect on for what I say in this is, hey, how come Russia didn't rig the election this time? Oh, wait, that's because the whole of the narrative was an absolute sideshow, an absolute lie last time around. If Putin had had the ability, why wouldn't he have just done it again? Oh, no, wait, this time it was the CCP, and we now have the receipts to prove it. DNI is proving that to be correct.
Real quickly, 10 seconds, how do people get to you?
Yeah. Well, Gab is actually blowing up for me right now. I had 5,000 last time. I got 65,000. Gab.com/Raheem.
Okay, Raheem Kassam, thank you very much. We're going to take a short commercial break. We're going to return with the CEO of Cloud Hub, another platform for people on the right.
You want to play. Bring it on and I will fight.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to War Room. Listen, this is all about building community and making sure that community is activated, energized, and focused. And every day, every couple of days, we try to bring you another platform and the senior leadership of that platform to tell you how you can get on and what you can do with it. I want to bring in now, from last week, we had the CEO of Cloud Hub, Jeff Brain. Jeff, your Twitter, your Facebook, and your YouTube. Tell us exactly what Cloud Hub is. How many people are signing up now? How can our audience, this massive global audience, how can they get on, and why should they want to get on?
Sure. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me, Steve. Yeah, so I created Cloud Hub because I felt social media had gone astray, right? They stepped away from their roots, which is, like you said, building community. Particularly now, our businesses are closed, we're locked in our homes, our voices are being silenced. So Cloud Hub is, like you said, a complete package. It includes what you do on Facebook, it includes what you do on Twitter, it includes what you do on YouTube. We have great channels, we have groups, people can express themselves freely. And now that's very, very important for people to do. So we're getting about 200,000 people a day. I invite your audience. You have a great audience. I invite them to come to Cloud Hub. It's www.cloudhub.com, and they can either use it on their computer or they can download it from the Apple or Android store. There's links right there for them to use. It takes 2 minutes to sign up. Some of the important things, we don't invade your privacy. We don't dig into your phone. We don't dig into your SIM card. We don't take any information off your phone. We don't track you to the mall. We're not sharing or selling any of your data. That's not our interest. We also are a free speech platform, but it's not the Wild West. We do not promote violence and we do not promote hate, but you're free to come and talk about any issue and any side of the issue. And that's the problem we're experiencing with the existing platforms, right? They're deciding what we can talk about and what we cannot talk about. So Cloud Hub is all about bringing people together, and it's for both sides of the aisle. We're building some incredible tools for people to be able to use to organize, advocate, interact with their legislators, access resources. Right now, since Parler was taken down, we're seeing a lot from Parler coming over, but those are great tools that the left is going to want to use too. And really what we're trying to do is use the power of social media to bring people together and allow them to connect, collaborate, and solve the problems. And I think that's badly needed right now. We're a very divided society, very polarized, and we're here to say enough. Come to Cloud Hub, organize the issues, whether it's a political issue, civic issue, or social issue you care about. Come and use our tools.
Okay, Jeff, let me ask you a question. The people signed up for Parler, and the CEO says Parler could be back up next week. Other people saying it's never coming back. They're just going to have to sue. A lot of people got frustrated with having to go into Parler and set up there and build a following, and then have it just taken out. Can you guarantee people? Have you built your own service? Do you have a system that if people go the trouble and really do it and get engaged and start building a community, that's just not going to, the tech oligarchs aren't going to walk in one day and say, Cloud Hub, you're canceled. And so people feel like, gosh, I wasted all that time and effort. What kind of guarantees you give that you're going to be around?
Sure. So first of all, I can't give really any guarantee, right? Because the Apple store, you're dependent on that, the Android store. And we are, though, taking steps to make sure that our platform is protected, and that will not be a problem. But also, part of the problem there was some issues about moderation, and Cloud Hub is actually very responsible moderating. Also, we're very proactive. I've had conversations with our partners months ago to tell them what Cloud Hub is and what Cloud Hub is not, and what we allow and what we do not allow. but we're very proactive on Cloud Hub, and I don't believe we have the same issues that Parler had. But I will also tell you we're protecting our interest in the long run, and we recognize those.
When you
steps we have
say
to take, and we're taking
moderation,
them.
where do you draw the line, like for free speech and for people to be able to talk about what they want to talk about? Because are you moderating it such that people feel constrained or unnecessary constraint, or where do you draw the line as your moderation team looks into the community and what the community is talking about?
Great question. So you'll never feel constrained when you're talking issues. You can talk about any issue and any side of the issue. We think it's good for the people to come and bring their issues and discuss them, and then let the members decide what's right, what's wrong. It's worked historically. Where we draw the line is in behavior. So if you're talking issues, that's absolutely fine. But when you start to go and attack somebody and use some racial slurs or things like that, or you engage in graphic sexual, conversations or content, that's where we draw the line. And that's only where we draw the line. So for instance, we're very transparent. Your members, your viewing audience can come and read our terms of service. It's all there. We don't hide it or play games like some of the other platforms. It's all there, what's acceptable and what's not. So for instance, if somebody was typing a message and they used the N-word, they would get a pop-up that simply says, this is not appropriate for our platform, please edit or delete it. But it never lands on our platform. Now that had nothing to do with an issue, that was all about a behavior. We want people to be talking and civil in the conversations. People are tired of the toxic nature of Facebook and Twitter, and they come into Cloud Hub because they want to actually get things done.
Okay, once again, walk people through about they'll have to make the trade-off between toxicity and spiciness. So let's go to how do people get on once again. We got about a minute. Walk people through. We want everybody to take a look at this. If you like it, sign up. If you don't, move on. But I want everybody to at least give it a shot. So how do they do that?
Sure. Go to www.cloudhub.com. And I think they'll find that we're not like anything they've seen on the internet. We will be adding a Faith Hub. We'll be adding an Education Hub, a Business Hub, a Sports Hub, an Entertainment Hub, a Health Hub. We're connecting you to all the aspects of your life that are important. We like to say we're connecting our members to the things in life that matter most. It takes about 2 minutes to sign up and give us a look. We're not perfect yet, but we are working on getting there. But there will be bugs, and because of the traffic we're getting, it's a little slow, but it'll get better.
Jeff, thank you very much. Jeff Brain, CEO of Cloud Hub. Make sure you go there, check it out today. Another platform. Let 1,000 flowers bloom. Okay, we'll be back tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. This is another intense week in Washington, D.C. We'll bring it all to you starting tomorrow morning at 10 when you come back to the War Room.